Alright folks, let's talk Suriname. This little slice of paradise tucked away in South America has a history that's wilder than a pack of howler monkeys on Red Bull. Imagine a land so rich in biodiversity that it feels like stepping into a living, breathing encyclopedia of nature. From the dense canopies of the Amazonian rainforest to the intricate ecosystems that thrive within, Suriname is a treasure trove of natural wonders. We're talking thousands of years, long before any European ships showed up with their discoveries and whatnot. The indigenous peoples of Suriname have a history that stretches back millennia, with cultures and traditions that have been passed down through countless generations. These early inhabitants were masters of their environment, utilizing the abundant resources around them to build thriving communities. So, picture this: lush rainforests, mighty rivers, and indigenous tribes living the good life. They had a deep connection to the land, understanding its rhythms and cycles in a way that allowed them to live sustainably and harmoniously with nature. Their knowledge of medicinal plants, hunting techniques, and agricultural practices was unparalleled. You had the Arawaks chilling on the coast, fishing and farming like champs. These coastal communities were adept at utilizing the rich marine resources, developing sophisticated fishing techniques, and cultivating crops that thrived in the tropical climate. Their villages were hubs of activity with vibrant markets and communal gatherings. Then you had the Caribs, known for their, shall we say, assertive approach to life. These fierce warriors were not only skilled in combat but also had a complex social structure and rich cultural traditions. They were known for their seafaring abilities, often embarking on long voyages to trade and interact with other indigenous groups. Let's just say you didn't want to get on their bad side. The Caribs were formidable opponents, and their reputation as fierce warriors was well earned. They defended their territories with tenacity, ensuring that their way of life remained intact, despite external pressures. These guys had their own thing going, their own cultures, languages, and beliefs. Each tribe had its own unique identity, with customs and traditions that were deeply rooted in their history and environment. They celebrated their heritage through music, dance, and storytelling, passing down their knowledge and values to future generations. It was a whole different world back then, you know? A world where nature and humanity coexisted in a delicate balance, where the rhythms of the earth dictated the pace of life. The indigenous peoples of Suriname were stewards of their land, ensuring that its bountiful resources were preserved for future generations. No Twitter beefs, no reality TV, just pure, unadulterated nature and tribal living. Life was simpler, yet profoundly rich in its own way. The sense of community and connection to the land provided a foundation for a way of life that was both sustainable and fulfilling. But then, as is often the case in history, everything changed when the Europeans arrived. The arrival of European explorers marked the beginning of a new era, one that would bring significant changes to the indigenous way of life. The impact of colonization would be profound, reshaping the social, economic, and cultural landscape of Suriname. And trust me, things were about to get a whole lot more complicated. The clash of cultures, the struggle for resources, and the imposition of foreign rule would create a turbulent period in Suriname's history. The resilience and adaptability of the indigenous peoples would be put to the test as they navigated this new and challenging reality. Hold on to your hats, folks, because we're about to dive into some seriously tangled colonial history. The story of Suriname's colonization is one of conflict, resistance, and transformation. It's a tale that highlights the complexities of human history and the enduring spirit of those who lived through it. So there we were, minding our own business, when who shows up but the Europeans? They came with their big ships, strange clothes, and even stranger intentions. It was like an unexpected party that no one had invited. First it was the Spanish, sniffing around for gold like always. They were relentless, driven by tales of unimaginable wealth. They hacked their way through the dense forests, their eyes gleaming with the promise of gold. Then came the British and French, always eager to stick their colonial noses where they didn't belong. They were like rival siblings, each trying to outdo the other in claiming new territories and resources. But in the end, it was the Dutch who really set up shop in Suriname. They were the ones who saw the true potential of this land, not just for its resources but for its strategic location. Don't ask me why, maybe they lost a bet or something, or perhaps they were just more determined, more willing to take risks. Whatever the reason, they made Suriname their own. But hey, they were known for their tulips and windmills, so at least they brought some style to the jungle, right? Imagine, amidst the tropical heat and dense foliage, the sight of a Dutch windmill spinning in the breeze. Now, here's where things get interesting. The Dutch weren't just here for the scenery. They had big plans, and those plans revolved around one thing: sugar. The Dutch were all about that sugar, and Suriname was the perfect place to grow it. The climate, the soil, everything was just right for sugarcane plantations. But there was one tiny problem: finding people willing to do the backbreaking work on these plantations. The labor was grueling, the conditions harsh, and the rewards minimal. And that's where our story takes a dark turn, folks. The Dutch turned to the transatlantic slave trade, bringing in countless African slaves to toil under the scorching sun. It was a dark chapter in history, one that left a lasting impact on the region and its people. Okay, so the Dutch needed laborers for their sugar plantations, and how did they solve this little problem? Well, let's just say they weren't big on equal opportunity employment. They went with the tried and tested and utterly horrific method of slavery. Yep, they shipped over millions of Africans across the Atlantic, tearing families apart and forcing them to work in brutal conditions. It was a shameful chapter in human history, and its impact is still felt in Suriname today. But here's the thing about Suriname: even in the face of such cruelty, the enslaved Africans and their descendants found ways to resist, to preserve their culture, and to ultimately fight for their freedom. Section 4. Freedom Now, Suriname's Road to Independence. After centuries of forced labor and oppression, the enslaved people of Suriname finally got a taste of freedom in 1863 when slavery was abolished. This monumental event marked the end of a dark chapter in Suriname's history, but it was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards true freedom and self-determination. But hold up, don't get too excited just yet. The road ahead was anything but smooth. It wasn't like someone flipped a switch and suddenly everything was sunshine and rainbows. The abolition of slavery was a significant milestone, but it didn't instantly erase the deep-seated inequalities and challenges that the newly freed people faced. The Dutch were still calling the shots, and life after slavery was tough. The colonial powers maintained their grip on the economy and political structures, making it difficult for the Surinamese people to truly break free from their influence. The newly freed people had to rebuild their lives from scratch, facing discrimination and economic hardship. Sound familiar? They had to navigate a world that was still stacked against them, with limited resources and opportunities. It's a story that's played out time and time again around the world. The struggle for equality and justice is a universal one, and the people of Suriname were no exception. But the dream of true independence, of governing themselves and shaping their own destiny, that fire never died out. The Surinamese people continued to fight for their rights, organizing protests and movements that demanded change. And finally, in 1975, Suriname kicked the Dutch to the curb, figuratively speaking of course, and declared their independence. It was a moment of immense pride and joy, a testament to the resilience and determination of the Surinamese people. The journey was long and fraught with challenges, but they had finally achieved the freedom they had longed for. Section 5. The 20th Century and Beyond. Coups, Dictators, and Democracy. Okay, so Suriname's independent, right? Time to party? Well, not so fast. Like a teenager figuring out their life after moving out of their parents' house, Suriname's first few decades of independence were a bit messy. There were military coups, political turmoil, even a bit of dictatorship thrown in for good measure. It was like a telenovela, but with fewer dramatic hair flips and more, actual consequences. But despite the ups and downs, Suriname held on to its democracy, proving that this little nation had a whole lot of heart and resilience. They even had a female president for a while, which, let's face it, is more than some countries can say. Section 6. The Melting Pot, Suriname's Unique Cultural Blend. Now here's where things get really interesting. Remember all those different groups we talked about? The indigenous tribes, the African slaves, the Dutch colonizers? Well, they didn't just disappear, They mixed and mingled, creating a cultural blend that's as vibrant and diverse as a box of Crayola crayons. You've got languages like Sranentongo, a mix of Dutch, English, Portuguese, and who knows what else. You've got food that will make your taste buds sing, from spicy curries to Dutch-inspired pastries. And the music? Don't even get me started. It's a fusion of rhythms and melodies that will have you dancing in the streets. Section 7. Suriname today, finding its place on the world stage. So, where does Suriname stand today? Well, it's still finding its footing on the world stage, navigating the challenges of economic development, environmental protection, and, just trying to be a decent global citizen. But here's the thing. Suriname has something special, something that many other nations envy. It has its people, a resilient and diverse bunch who've learned to overcome adversity and build something truly unique. Suriname might be small, but it's got a big heart and even bigger potential. So keep an eye on this little South American nation because they're just getting started.